Diving into your next act or wondering what's ahead? Enjoy life as you change your path and embrace your authentic self.
Join me as we discuss the good, the bad, and the ugly of making big changes in your life. New directions both personally and professionally. Shake things up. But don't worry, you are not alone. On each episode, we'll be sharing stories, providing valuable information, and introducing you to others navigating their next act. So let's get inspired.
This is a Candy Factory Convo, Life in the Next Act with Gail Shane.
Welcome to Life in the Next Act. Today, we will be talking with Dr. Amanda Kemp, author, speaker, racial justice coach, mindfulness mentor, and founder of Racial Justice from the Heart, a program that promotes healthy conversations about race for compassionate change makers, facilitators, and coaches worldwide. Amanda will be discussing how and why she's on a mission to heal the planet by helping people to stop hidden racial bias and to see each other with compassion. We will learn how to look at ourselves and lean into the conversation about race. Hello and welcome, Amanda.
Thank you, Gail.
Amanda, you have always wanted to change the world. How old were you when you had this great idea, even though I say always, and how have you been doing it?
So I think my first thought about changing the world, my first conscious memory of that was when I was 7 and I wanted to be president of the United States because I thought, okay, that's the way to, change the world. I was very moved by the stories of Martin Luther King Jr. and the Civil Rights Movement. In my home, I grew up in foster care, and in my first foster home, we had a picture of MLK, Martin Luther King. We had Jesus, and we had Robert Kennedy. So that tells you something about us. So the desire to be a part of a shift and to make love central and to make sure everybody had enough to eat and that they felt safe. That was with me from a very early age.
And how have you been doing it?
Yeah. So I wrote my first poem when I was 9. And of course, that was to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Because I was pretty consumed with how to be good. I just have to say this message of compassion and love, transforming, it's just touched me. It really touched me. So when I felt like I wasn't able to do that, when I wasn't able to carry forward nonviolence in my own life as a kid, I felt so disappointed in myself and so frustrated with us as a community. But to answer your question, so how did I do it then? How am I doing it now? So poetry and the arts were one path that I took, because that's such a path that invites imagination and invites us to consider what could be possible rather than what's realistic, what's happened before. So that was my primary pathway for a long time. And then from the arts, I went more into academia for 10 years. And then I did another new act in my life. And I went back into the arts full time as a theater founder and director. And then I pivoted most recently to Racial Justice from the Heart, which is a business and but it's a social mission driven company.
Amanda, you have written 2 books, Stop Being Afraid, 5 Steps to Transform Your Conversations About Racism, and Say the Wrong Thing, a collection of personal essays about racial justice and compassion. From the book, Say the Wrong Thing, I'd like to play a short quote of an audio recording from a letter written by your son, Gabe, who expressed his thoughts a few years ago. It will sound familiar to many.
Mom, Take a look at this. I wrote it at 3 a.m. today. I wrote it not knowing where it would take me, but by the time I got to the end, I had diagnosed myself and identified my problem. Love, Gabe. There is a piece of me that doesn't allow certain things to slide. That piece is embedded in my soul, and I haven't figured out how to control it. At least once a month, I see a video of a black man being or killed by police. My parents and loved ones tell me to be careful. They tell me to do things I shouldn't have to do. But if I want to survive, I have to listen. I have to make sure I'm not a threat, because if I make someone scared or uncomfortable, they can shoot me. They can shoot my ass and get away with it. I've been internalizing these messages for the last 4 years, and it's changing my body. It's changing my brain and my emotions. It's making me go into survival mode, where I, a human being, become an animal, because that's what I'm constantly told I am, and how I see people like me being treated. It is beginning to be too much for me to cope with at times. People say things, or I watch a video of a handcuffed man's head being kicked like a football by a white dude with a badge. These things flip a switch. My body feels like it's going to detonate when it's reminded that where I live, I'm not safe. I don't have the same human experience as white people. I have to be on the lookout constantly, like prey in the wild. When I'm triggered, I don't have control of my body. When an animal is running from a predator, it's not thinking about anything else except survival. I'm 16 years old, and I know that feeling.
So my heart is racing right now. Amanda, what can we do to help young people who are feeling so hurt and frustrated?
Yeah. I heard that excerpt so many times. I think one of the most important things that we can do is to give people a platform to share what it's really like for them, to give young people a chance to really express themselves, and for us to listen, and to listen as people who love them. As a mother listening to a son, obviously, my love predated that letter, and my love continues on. But I'm not the only mother on this call, and I think that all of us who've experienced mothering or who are mothering, I think what we can do to help young people is to let our hearts be broken open, number one. And number two is to give them a platform so they can speak and they can reflect on their experiences. And number three, really support them into claiming ownership of themselves. So when my son wrote that, he was 16 and he's now 21. And, you could say we're in the same, we're still in the same mess where there is this pattern of killing of unarmed Black people, and where we see a clear, what he said was, he felt like a prey, and he felt like he was being conditioned to see himself as an animal. So all of those media messages are still there. But, as a parent, as someone who cares for young people, I think we have to inculcate a sense of power to own themselves, power to choose which images they're consuming, power to heal so that they're not just in reaction mode. It is understandable. I have great empathy, clearly, for my child. And to leave him where he was, to not invite him into tools that can help him take ownership of his feelings, his self-concept, would be to leave him oppressed, would be to leave him despairing. And what I can say to you today and to all your listeners is that the son who they heard today is now leading meditation in my community in Racial Justice from the Heart. 2 nights ago, after the trial completed with Derek Chauvin and his conviction was announced, we had a gathering for people in the Racial Justice from the Heart community, and it was my son who led it. It was my son who took us through a guided meditation that dissolved the fear, that rooted us in love and in self-ownership. So, and I needed that. So, how do we help young people? I think I've said some things, but I also want you to know that young people can help us.
Beautiful. Amanda, what is implicit racial bias, and why do you say everyone has it?
So, implicit racial bias is hidden bias. It's conditioned into us. What we know about implicit bias is that it's unconscious. It's not necessarily asked for. And often it's contrary to our stated values. If we don't investigate them, they will continue to operate unconsciously to negative effect. So, an example of implicit racial bias is when we don't realize that a TV show or a history book is being written or is being presented from a European American perspective. Instead, we are presenting that as standard, normal, good. So if you look at the stories of cowboys and Indians, whose perspective are we being trained to adopt? If you look at Captain Marvel, Superman, Spider-Man, who are we trained to see as representing us or the hope for the future? It's typically white men, white Anglo-American, English-speaking men. So, so all that exposure over time through our history, through our classrooms, through what we have on our walls, how God is depicted, how the first people are depicted, all of that is conditioning our brains toward what has come to be seen as a preference for white people over darker skinned people. So it's been found to be active or operative in areas where people have great intentions, like preschool or doctors who want to have great outcomes for all their patients. They're all signs of implicit racial bias in all these fields. And most dramatically, it comes up in American society in police relations with Black people. That's where it comes up the most, painfully, and with life or death, immediate life and death consequences. But we all have it. And the way to counteract it is to investigate it. We have a training where we offer 5 steps. I'm not going to try to run them all down for you here, but you can find them on our website.
So the ways to stop implicit, hidden racial bias is to investigate.
Yes.
Investigate.
So the first, can I just say one thing?
Yeah.
I'll tell you the first step. The first step is to become aware of whiteness, because that is something that most people of European descent don't do. And many, many people are confused about whiteness, not as an identity, but as a system, as a series of practices. I'm going to leave that as a pebble.
You sure? Because I've got the steps with me.
Oh, go ahead.
I would love to share it.
Excellent.
So you did number 1, become aware of the whiteness or your automatic conditioning, right?
Yep.
2, remove things that reinforce marginalization of people of color.
Absolutely. Visuals, audio, 100%.
Add practices that promote positive associations with people of color. Move toward that which you've been conditioned to fear. Break the silence and start talking about implicit or hidden racial bias. Anything you want to add?
No,
to that?
those are the 5. Those are the 5.
Amanda, how can white women and women of color have strong relationships?
Well, I think it starts with white women investigating their own hidden racial bias. I have been in a number of groups that were predominantly white or white women led. And one of the things that makes it very frustrating as a woman of color in those settings is how clueless the leaders were about whiteness as a system, as a series of practices. So that they would inadvertently just come at issues or come towards me with all kinds of baggage that I would then have to do a lot of work to make sure I don't get offended by that. Okay, ignore that, move forward past that, or labor and talk with someone about something and then have them respond in a way very tearful and very defensive. So I pretty much just want to go. So really, to have that strong relationship, I think white women need to do that implicit bias investigation. And I think women of color, we need to be conscious and intentional about where we put our energy. So if we are going to engage in a conversation about racism, for example, let's make sure that we're not in that raw space where, I got that letter from my child. So is that a time for me to engage in a difficult conversation about racism? Absolutely not. I need my attention. My heart needs some mending. Maybe I need a bath. I'm just saying for real, these conversations can be intense. And I think it's important for us to not just jump into them without preparing ourselves and take care of ourselves, so that when we have a conversation, we're not looking to the other person to take care of us, because in their ignorance or in their own emotional state, they may not have that capacity.
Racial justice from the heart. The H. Hold space for transformation. E. Express your feelings. A. Act with intention. R. Reflect on yourself. T. Trust the process. Racial justice from the heart. Why is it important to do racial justice work from the heart?
So Gail, I think this is what distinguishes us from most racial justice work and advocacy that's happening. I say it's important to do it from the heart for a couple of reasons. Number one, if we're only righteous and out to get justice, we can easily become self-righteous. We can easily stop listening. We can lose the understanding that we are imperfect human beings too. You know what I mean? And I think that if you get to the point of self-righteousness without humility and compassion, then you can very easily slip into us versus them. And ultimately, I think the us versus them is going to keep us trapped in situations of harm and suffering. I'm actually interested in liberation. And liberation is beyond justice. So that's one thing. The other reason why we say racial justice from the heart is because the mind is built for defense. The heart is built for connection. And if what we want is to actually create a world that works for all of us, we need connection. We need each other. And if we keep the conversation in the mind, we can keep ourselves in a circle of conflict.
Amanda, you just continue to touch me. How about your next act? How will you continue to change the world?
I'm so inspired by my children, to be honest with you. Gabriel, who I mentioned, leading meditations in our community. My daughter, Makeda, she became a co-host in my podcast called Get Your Chocolate On. And so my next act, honestly, I want to create a book. It's going to be called Makeda's Magic. And it's these spiritual lessons that my daughter, or pearls of wisdom that my daughter just, shared spontaneously in our podcast conversations. Like, we would be live and I would just be like, I just had no idea that she had thought this, and that she was taking on these practices of, of creating, positive relations with people, it's just fascinating to me. So there was that. And then with my son, I was thinking about him, his own journey from where he was in that story that you read in his letter to me to where he is now, where he's giving me clarity and strength. I just want to help his voice to get more widely heard and to be more widely heard amongst his peers, other young Black men and boys. That would be a fabulous next act. And I want to live in some mountains for a little while.
You need a little rest and relaxation?
Oh my gosh.
No, it's not in the cards. Well, maybe. You'll get to that act.
I will get to that act.
You will.
100%.
Amanda, which nonprofit is important to you and why?
I support arts-based nonprofits. So in the Lancaster community, I support Crispus Attucks on a regular basis. I have a monthly agreement with them. And Crispus Attucks Community Center does arts stuff. It also does, I supported their mentoring program, which is a jobs program for youth. Every job I got when I was a teenager was through some kind of government or city program. And I'm very grateful that I got to work and earn my own money. I support the Asian, what is it called? They have a couple names. So there's the Asian Pacific Islander Cultural Center on the West Coast in California, and Asian Improv Records or Asian Improv Arts. And I support those two organizations because they promote art as a tool for community building and social change, and also as a space in which people can show solidarity to each other. So even though those organizations focus on Asian American arts and artists, they also are consistently invite Black practitioners or create art in relationship to Black Lives Matter. So I like to support organizations that promote solidarity, that promote the arts, because that's a place where vision and possibility is nurtured, and that support that are Black led.
Thank you. Amanda, thank you so much for being with us today and sharing your heart and your passion to break the silence. You can reach Amanda at dramandakemp.com. Please visit the website and find out how to take the steps to racial justice from the heart. I'd like to leave you with this by sharing words this week from my friend, Rabbi Jack Paskoff. To repair the world, we need to look in the mirror, challenge our assumptions, open our eyes and our ears. We need to be willing to enter into brave spaces to have difficult conversations. We need to be willing to deepen our discomfort, to challenge each other, and to grow. This is our human task. This is our Jewish task. Join us next time as we aim to inspire, empower, and inform. Life in the Next Act is a proud member of the Candy Factory Collective. You can find the show streaming on YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, and LinkedIn. And you could subscribe to the audio version anywhere you get your podcasts.
Gail has experienced many acts over the years. Living a full life, she is a mother of 2 and grandmother of 3, and currently calls Lancaster, PA home. An entrepreneur at heart, she's owned several businesses, hosted a popular radio show, and has written for prominent publications highlighting nonprofits. While she holds her real estate license in Florida and PA, she believes her true calling is giving others a voice.
Learn more about Gail at gailshane.com. Life in the Next Act is produced by the Candy Factory Collective at the Candy Factory Co-working Campus in Lancaster, PA. Production support by Jason Mundock and Anna Tran. Administrative support by Ann Kirby, Ariana Henderson, and Krisha Martzel. Notes and links can be found on the show post at our website, candyfactorycollective.com. Candy Factory.
Collective.